My name is Rachel Lawson. I'm 33 years old, and for the past 11 years, I've lived with one obsession: earning the legacy I was born to claim. While others chased love, travel, and dreams with soft edges, I chose concrete, steel, blueprints. I didn't party. I didn't date. I didn't live. Not in the way most people define living, because I believed in something bigger than comfort, a future I was promised, but never truly handed. I grew up in the shadow of Lawson Built, my family's construction empire. I memorized permit codes before I memorized love songs. By the time I was 9, I was correcting foremen on site. At 14, I was doing payroll while my classmates picked prom dresses. Every time a client shook my father's hand and praised my work ethic, he'd glance at me and say, "She's got it, just like I did when I started." He never said this will be yours in words, but in the way he looked at me, I saw a promise. And that silent promise became the foundation of everything I sacrificed. I turned down Ivy League offers, skipped every holiday, missed birthdays, weddings, even funerals. While friends posted beach sunsets and engagement rings, I was in a hard hat on job sites at 6 a.m., troubleshooting steel delays and weather emergencies. I wasn't building projects. I was building a kingdom, a legacy, a throne I believed I was earning brick by brick. But here's the truth. Sometimes the people you trust the most let you build castles on land they've already promised to someone else. And when you finally discover the truth, it doesn't just hurt, it shatters. If this story already hits something in your heart, a memory, a warning, or a wound, don't just scroll past. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because stories like mine aren't rare. They're just rarely spoken out loud. And the rest of this story, you won't want to miss. They say success requires sacrifice, but no one warns you what it's like when your sacrifices start to erase the very edges of who you are. By the time I turned 27, my life had been reduced to spreadsheets, concrete, and the hum of fluorescent lights after midnight. I didn't have time for dinner parties or dating apps. My phone was filled with subcontractor contacts, not saved anniversaries or sweet messages. 2 people tried to love me. Both eventually left, whispering the same thing on their way out. You don't want a partner, you want a project. And maybe they were right. I missed weddings. I missed birthdays. I once skipped my godmother's funeral because our steel delivery schedule got pushed up a day. I told myself it was justified, that the company needed me more. But deep down, I knew what it really was. I couldn't afford to stop. Because if I did, someone might notice how easy it would be to replace me. So I stayed. I showed up first, left last, slept on the couch in the back hallway during peak season. I wasn't just loyal, I was obsessed, and I wore that obsession like armor. Every new system implemented, every file reorganized, every delayed deadline I pulled back into place with nothing but grit and caffeine. It was my silent resume. A resume I believed my father was reading, even if he never said a word. Because when he looked at me across the boardroom, sometimes I saw it again, that flicker of silent pride. The unspoken contract between a builder and his blood. Keep proving yourself, and one day, it's yours. That belief, it was my oxygen. But what no one tells you is this: when your self-worth is tethered entirely to someone else's silence, every nod that doesn't come, every thank you left unspoken, every promotion given to someone who never stayed late, it doesn't just sting, it chips away at your faith. And eventually, even the most faithful begin to wonder, was I ever really being prepared to lead? Or was I just being used to hold things together until someone shinier came along? It happened on a Tuesday, a dull, gray afternoon in April, the kind that never warns you it's about to change your entire life. I had just finished presenting the quarterly financial review to the board, still riding the mental exhaustion of back-to-back project delays and renegotiated vendor contracts. My phone buzzed. Mom. She never called during work hours. I picked up, worried. Rachel, your sister's back. We're having dinner tonight. It'd be good to see you both at the table again, as a family. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the phone. Rebecca, 2 years older, the golden child, the one who left everything, the company, the country, the family, to chase art across continents. Prague, Bali, Lisbon, then New York, 10 years gone. She missed 10 Christmases, 6 birthdays, and both grandparents' funerals. No explanation, no return ticket. And now, she was back? That night, I sat at the same dining table where I'd once done my high school accounting homework, the same table where Dad had once said, "You'll take over one day, Rach. You've got it in your blood." Mom made my favorite, rosemary roast chicken, but when she placed it on the table, she smiled politely and said, "For both my girls." Rebecca walked in like a perfume ad, hair in a messy bun, a white linen dress flowing like she was still half floating through life. She hugged Mom, air-kissed Dad, then sat across from me with a soft grin. "You're really doing it, huh? Dad talks about you nonstop, says you're the one keeping the whole company together." I nodded, unsure what to say. "But," she added, tilting her head, "I think Lawson Built could use a little artistic energy. You know, some spark, branding, creative vision. There's more to construction than structure." She said it lightly, with that whimsical tone she always used when she was about to bulldoze through something serious, like responsibility. I didn't think much of it. Not until the following Monday. Dad called me into a meeting room next to his office. Rebecca was already there, sipping coffee like she belonged. "Rachel," he said. "Starting today, Rebecca will join the company as our creative brand director. She'll oversee how we present ourselves, from decks to digital presence. The industry's evolving, and I think it's time we did too." I froze. Not outwardly. I smiled, nodded, said all the right things. But inside, something deep cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. I had poured a decade of my life into building this company's spine, and now the daughter who left was waltzing back in, already holding a title and a coffee cup? That was the moment I realized. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come like a knife. It comes like a quiet decision made in a room you weren't invited to. At first, I told myself it was nothing, that it was just a new role, a symbolic title, that her presence, Rebecca Lawson, creative brand director, wouldn't change what I had already built brick by brick. But lies, even the ones you tell yourself, don't last long when reality hits like slow, repeated bruises. Within a month, it was clear. Rebecca wasn't just joining the company. She was reframing it, and suddenly, everyone was clapping. New logo, new website, new presentation slides in softer fonts and pastel color palettes. She called it humanizing the Lawson identity. Dad, the same man who once refused to update our email domain because the old one works fine, now called her Change's visionary. In meetings, I watched him lean toward her ideas, asking, "Rebecca, what do you think?" While I sat across the table with spreadsheets, projections, and performance metrics, the bones of every contract we'd landed in the past 5 years, it didn't matter. Rebecca was new. She was shiny. She was fresh air. And I had become the furniture. Reliable, functional, unnoticed. She clocked in at 9:30, took 90-minute lunch breaks, left by 4. And still, she became the centerpiece of every campaign, every client pitch. I was the one drafting budgets, mediating staff disputes, meeting vendors at 6 a.m. in freezing warehouses, but she was the one posting filtered photos of conference rooms with captions like, "Creative magic in motion, not your family business, not built by heart." I said nothing, not because I agreed, but because I knew deep down that in a family like mine, silence sometimes buys survival. But it didn't stop the sting. Every time Dad introduced us as the perfect succession duo, something inside me tightened. He said it like a compliment, but to me it sounded like a reduction, like the throne I had earned was now a shared seat. No longer the future CEO, now just one of the daughters. Worse, I saw it in people's eyes, that polite but telling shift. From Rachel runs the company to Rebecca's bringing a new energy. Still, I kept showing up, first in, last out, fixing what others missed, cleaning up after her creative ideas that never accounted for budget, time, or legal constraints. But when you spend too long cleaning up someone else's mess, you start to wonder, are you a leader or just the janitor in disguise? That doubt, quiet but sharp, began to grow, and I didn't know it yet. But it was about to lead me straight into the file cabinet that would shatter everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, and inheritance. I don't remember what made me stay late that evening. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the look Dad and Rebecca exchanged that morning when I asked about the Evermere townhouse project, the one I had shepherded from concept to bidding phase. "Already sent to legal for signing," Dad said too quickly. "You can check the scanned copy in the system." But there was no copy, and I knew my father better than anyone. He never sent out originals without making a hard copy for the archive. Never. So after hours, when the building went quiet and the cleaning crew had clocked out, I found myself standing in the basement archive room. The walls still smelled like old paper and dust. The hum of the HVAC was the only sound. I started pulling drawers, flipping files. I wasn't just looking for the townhouse contract anymore, I was looking for something, anything. And then I saw it. A black folder. No label. Just wedged between a 2009 zoning appeal and a forgotten loan agreement. I opened it. And what I found took the air from my lungs. Chair transfer agreement. Lawson Built Construction. April 17th, signed. Notarized. Stamped. 72% of Henry Lawson's shares transferred to Rebecca A. Lawson. 18% retained under Henry. 10% to my mother. Zero mention of me. Not a line, not a footnote, not even a courtesy clause. I read it again, then again, hoping for some legal catch, a placeholder note, a draft watermark. But it was airtight, final. I had given over a decade of my life for a crown that was never mine to claim. My hands trembled. I had to grip the cabinet shelf to steady myself. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The walls pressed in like punishment. Was this what betrayal looked like? Not a scream, not a slap, just paper, ink, a decision made without me. A soft knock behind me. I turned. Eleanor, our office manager, the only other person who still knew the basement filing system like I did. Her eyes met mine. There was something in them, guilt? Pity? "You knew," I whispered. My voice didn't even sound like my own. "How long?" She stepped inside, closed the door gently. "He planned to tell you. Once things settled, he thought you'd understand." Understand? Understand why the company I bled for was handed to someone who hadn't worked a full month on site? I didn't answer. I just walked out, the file still clutched in my shaking hands. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I sat in silence and stared at the evidence. And I made a promise. If they chose her, then they could have her. But they would no longer have me. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m. The red brick house I grew up in hadn't changed. The same porch light, same rose bush by the steps, same creaky screen door. But somehow it all felt smaller, colder, like a photograph you realize was staged. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. Mom was in the kitchen, apron on, humming to soft classical music. The smell of beef stew, my favorite, filled the air. Dad sat at the dining table reading the paper. Rebecca was setting silverware, perfectly placed like a magazine spread. "Rachel!" Mom turned, arms wide, smiling. I let her hug me. I didn't hug back. "Wine?" Rebecca asked, already holding a glass. "No," I said evenly. "I want to be clear-headed tonight." The room froze. I walked to the table and placed the black folder, the one I'd found in the archives, directly in front of Dad, opened it, and said nothing. Rebecca read the first line and paled. Mom raised a hand to her mouth. Dad, who rarely flinched, stared down, expression unreadable. "Strange," I said softly. "A decision this massive, and yet no one thought to tell me." "Rachel," Mom began, her voice shaking, "your father was going to—" "When?" I cut in. "After you handed over every piece of what I built? After I finished scrubbing Rebecca's creative blunders into something billable?" Dad finally spoke. "You're overreacting." I snapped the folder shut. Don't talk to me about emotion when you signed me out of the company like I was just another outdated system. Rebecca cleared her throat. You still have value here. Value? My voice went razor sharp. I saved this company during the 2020 collapse. I renegotiated union contracts, cut operating costs by 17%, and converted a failing build into profit in 3 weeks. But the one who gets control is the girl who showed up last year and thinks branding is changing the color palette. Silence. The only sound was the stew bubbling on the stove. Rachel, Dad said, tone stern, Rebecca brings creativity. You're too rigid. No, I said. I bring structure. I bring survival. And if that's become inconvenient to your narrative of fresh beginnings, then let me make it easy. I stood. I'm not asking for fairness anymore. I'm not waiting for recognition. I'm done. You're not serious, Mom whispered. I turned to my father. I was never the heir, just the placeholder, the spare part. And as of tonight, that part is being removed from the machine. And I walked out. No tears, no second glance, just the sound of my own footsteps, finally walking away from what once defined me. 3 days after I resigned, I got a call from Eleanor. Her voice was lower than usual, almost hesitant, like she knew what she was about to say would hit me harder than any official meeting ever could. Rachel, I think you should come in. Just for a few minutes. I don't work there anymore, I replied flatly. This directly involves you. They're about to present the Evermere project. My breath caught. Evermere. The sustainable housing concept I had spent 2 years building from scratch, from demographic analysis to phased budgeting, down to slide design. I pitched it to Dad months ago. He called it too ambitious, too unconventional, told me to shelve it. But I never deleted the files. I stored every draft, every diagram, every market model in the internal system, dated, organized, mine. That afternoon, I drove to the building like a stranger. Eleanor met me at the side door. She hadn't revoked my access card. She led me to conference room 2, cracked the door just wide enough for me to see. Inside, Rebecca stood confidently in front of the big screen, clicking through a familiar deck. Too familiar. The Evermere project targets eco-conscious families in the Northwest Corridor, she explained, her voice smooth, professional. We propose a 4-phase rollout over 26 months, structured as 30 to 40 to 30 allocations. My heart stopped. It was mine, word for word, slide for slide. Even the color scheme, mint green and soft charcoal, was exactly how I'd left it. The only difference? Each page now bore her name in the bottom corner, Rebecca A. Lawson, Creative Director. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I just stood there, shaking, breath shallow, skin cold, not out of shock, out of clarity. They hadn't just taken my seat. They had taken my work, my voice, my intellect, scrubbed my fingerprints clean and stamped hers in glittery ink. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened my old files. Every draft, every timestamp, every original concept, it was all there, legal, dated proof of authorship. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed my father's number. He answered on the 3rd ring. We need to meet, I said. Not at home, not at the office. He hesitated. Rachel. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., Darrow's Cafe on 5th. Or I'll send everything I have to Evermere's partners and their legal team. Click. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring what they tried to erase, and reminding them, just because I walked away doesn't mean I'm gone. Darrow's Cafe wasn't crowded that evening, just the soft murmur of low jazz, the scent of roasted beans, and the weight of what was about to happen pressing against my ribs like armor. At exactly 6 p.m., my father walked in. He didn't look like the man who once built an empire from a rusted pickup truck and a set of borrowed tools. He looked tired, defensive, older than I remembered, finally human. I didn't stand, didn't greet him, just pointed to the seat across from me. He sat, slowly. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him, split down the middle. Left side, my original Evermere proposal. Time-stamped. Dated. Authored by me. Right side. Rebecca's presentation from 2 days ago. Identical. What do you want, Rachel? His voice was calm. Too calm. I want to know who gave her permission to use my work and present it as hers. Silence. If you say it was a collaboration or a coincidence, I'll bring every email, every draft, every internal rejection I got, and I'll deliver it straight to Evermere's legal team and the press. He rubbed his temple, sighed. Rebecca, built on what you left behind. No, I snapped. She didn't build anything. She copied, she rebranded, and you let her. More silence. This time, heavier. This was a strategic move, he muttered finally. Your execution, she's presentation. I just thought. You thought you could stitch both together and no one would notice you cut one of us out of the picture. I leaned forward, voice steel cold. You stole from me. You gave her the stage with a script I wrote. That's not strategy. That's theft. He looked at me then, not like a father, not like a mentor, but like a man realizing the leverage had shifted. What do you want? He asked, quieter now. I slid a USB drive across the table. All the evidence is in here. You have 2 days to remove her name from the project and issue a written apology, signed. Or I go public. You're bluffing. I've never bluffed, I said. You taught me that. Remember? A beat passed, then another. So this is who you are now? He said, almost with bitterness. Corporate threats? Legal leverage? I stood, packed up my laptop. No, I said. This is who I've always been. You just preferred the version of me that stayed quiet and cleaned up messes for free. Then I walked out, heart pounding. Not in fear, in power. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging to be seen. I was setting the terms. 2 days passed. No emails. No apology. No calls from the office. I wasn't surprised. Instead, I spent those 48 hours compiling everything. Detailed project reports, client endorsements, risk assessments, and internal communications that proved one thing beyond a doubt. I wasn't just an employee. I was the backbone. On the 3rd morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. Rachel, we need to talk. It was my father. There's nothing left to discuss unless lawyers are present and everything is in writing, I replied without hesitation. A pause. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Harold's office. We'll talk. As equals. The next day, I walked into the law firm in a slate gray suit, hair tied back, and a folder in hand prepared down to the last decimal. Inside, my father was already seated beside Harold. My mother was there too. Rebecca was absent, and honestly, that was for the best. Harold opened the conversation. Rachel, we've reviewed your terms. I didn't flinch. Then I'll need a signed agreement today. Otherwise, I have a meeting with Evermere's legal counsel at 2 p.m. My father looked at me for a long time, longer than he had in years. You're serious? I always was. You just liked me better when I was silent. He said nothing. Then, slowly, he extended his hand across the table. Let's start over. I looked at his hand. Once familiar, now a stranger's. Still, I took it. Not as a daughter, as a partner. The deal was signed within an hour. I was granted 40% ownership, taken directly from his share, a voting seat on the board, the title of Chief Operating Officer. Rebecca retained 35%. My mother held the remaining 25%, but no longer had a voice in the company's direction. When I walked out of Harold's office, the agreement tucked under my arm, I wasn't stepping back into my old role. I was establishing a new order, one where my worth was no longer assumed. It was inked, notarized, and undeniable. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't chasing approval or waiting to be chosen. I had set the terms. And this time, they had no choice but to meet me on my level. 2 weeks after the agreement was signed, I walked back into Lawson Built, not as a shadow, not as a daughter desperate to be noticed, but as Chief Operating Officer and co-owner of 40% equity. This time, my name was engraved on the brass plate outside my door, not beneath someone else's, not in fine print, mine. The company had to be rebuilt, not from the ground up, but from the inside out. Rebecca, still holding the creative director title, was now confined to where her talents belonged: branding, visual identity, client presentation. She no longer touched contracts, budgets, or operations. I restructured our culture. The 70-hour weeks? Gone. Unpaid late nights? Over. I instituted a capped 45-hour work week, no exceptions unless pre-approved. We weren't cogs anymore. We were builders. Real ones. Executive meetings were short, data-driven, and brutally clear. No more hour-long lectures from my father. From now on, instinct had to answer to evidence. Rebecca struggled with structure at first, but I didn't fight her. I coached her, not for her sake, but for the team. And slowly, she changed. She listened. She took notes. She asked better questions. A month later, Evermere's principal investor sent an email. "We're willing to renegotiate, but only if Rachel Lawson is leading the project." I printed that message and pinned it to the staff bulletin board. For 5 seconds, the entire floor went silent. Then came the applause. Not for me, but because we were back, together, stronger, on our terms. My father now comes in 3 days a week, as an advisor only. He reads reports, gives quiet feedback, but the decisions? They're mine now. In my office, one I designed from scratch, I framed the original sketch of Evermere, coffee stain and all. Next to it is a note from Eleanor. "You didn't just hold the company together, you held yourself together when no one else did. If you've made it to the end of this story and felt even a fragment of yourself in it, in the silence, in the sacrifice, in the fight to be seen, then don't let that go quietly. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more real, raw stories that remind us power isn't given, it's claimed.